It's time for me to make right a wrong that I did yesterday in my video about the Randy Blythe situation. I said Czechoslovakia. It's actually the Czech Republic in the early part of the 1990s. Czechoslovakia, the larger country, broke off into the Czech Republic, and Slovakia, much like countries that are bordering in Austria-Hungary, used to be Austria-Hungary, all one word, hyphenated, and now they are two separate countries as well. So my apologies for that. History buffs and geography buffs, I am not ignorant, I merely made a mistake. It's time for us to talk about another album, and I have a feeling this is going to be long. I have a feeling this is going to be a lengthy review, so I hope you guys are in it for the long haul, because I'm in it for the long haul, and I have a lot to say about this. And so let's jump right into it. The album that we're going to be talking about today is going to be Periphery 2, This Time It's Personal, of course by the band Periphery. Periphery, a couple of years ago, burst onto the scene and had a really interesting experimental take on the progressive metal genre, on the experimental metal genre, and was kind of one of the forebearers of the idea of djent. Now, of course, everyone's going to argue that the true forefathers of djent are, of course, the band Meshuggah, and every band after that are just Meshuggah-ites, or Meshuggah-isms, or Meshuggah wannabes. However, this was a band that used those similar elements in a different format. They used it to combine with an experimental form of progressive music in order to create just a new dynamic, a new little idea, a new niche in the progressive metal subgenre and overall the heavy metal genre. So with number 2, you have to realize, and you have to almost ask yourself, what more can they really do? I mean, this is something where they almost could repeat that same style over and over again ad nauseum, and we all know how I feel about djent. We all know that I feel that a lot of djent bands are conceptually rather boring, and they don't really offer too much to the table for me. Yes, there is a lot of technical precision. There's a lot of wacky time signatures. There's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking as far as from a musical nerd aspect. However, whenever it comes to overall construction, good body, and, real interesting music in order to really keep you in tune and to keep you kind of involved with the songs, there just wasn't much with a lot of these bands. We're talking like One by Tesseract after their highly successful EP. And then, of course, the first Periphery album was, in my opinion, just kind of an average affair, just to name 2. And then there's other albums by other bands that have sort of fallen by the wayside. Some I've reviewed, others I have not. However, on This Time It's Personal, I think I'm going to go out on a limb. I think I'm going to have to be bold on this album review, mainly because in order to be a reviewer, I have to, in one part, give you my opinion on an album, but at the same time, I also need to speak from a very objective standpoint. And there are many things that I hear that cause me to want to make an extremely bold statement that is extremely risky in nature, but at the same time, also, it's hard for me to ignore its potential truth. So I will go ahead and make that statement right now, and I will support my statement with my argument as this review continues. This album has the potential to win over a lot more fans for Periphery, and actually break into the mainstream. Now, why do I feel that way? Now, I'm going to preface this by telling you a little story. Back in 1998, actually maybe even a little bit before that, the time frame is all a blur to me right now. I heard a band for the first time that I kind of enjoyed. I didn't think it was that bad, but I liked it enough because I realized that it was probably going to break into the mainstream, become a huge phenomenon, and that everybody who heard this was going to just eat it up and adore it. And it was something that was aggressive, something that was really out of the box for what was, I guess, akin to that time frame, especially with radio alternative. That band was Slipknot. I said those words to a friend of mine in a letter that I wrote to her, and lo and behold, here we are roughly 14 years later, and Slipknot arguably has had a huge influence on the past near decade and a half in music. Like it or not. Why do I feel that Periphery has the opportunity to have that same cult icon status? And why do I think that this album is the one that could set them over the top? Well, here's my argument. My argument is very simple, but my argument deals with something that's extremely complex. The simplest of arguments is simply this. This album while it does have some mind-bending structures, while it does contain all of the technical precision that you would expect in a technical metal album, as well as a progressive metal album, while it does also contain the down-tuned, overly precise, very mathematical riff writing and musical construction that you expect on Gent or an experimental record, this has a certain level of accessibility to it. This album has a certain level of, here you go, eat me up, thank me later, written all over it. The songs on here, while they are diverse in a certain degree, are not expansively diverse, almost as though each and every song is a separate universe. I know that there's a lot of Urses in there, just stick with me. This is an album that has a very similar sound to it throughout, and only breaks the status quo on choice and chance moments. Now typically, whenever I review albums of that nature, they end up being slightly average, average or slightly good, or average or slightly bad. With this particular case, it happens to be the former, where it is average to good, if not slightly great. This is actually a very, very consistent record. And this idea where they are not taking too many damaging and potentially bowel-shattering risks is the reason for that. Considering they have stuck around an idea and have really expanded it as much as humanly possible and done as much as they can with that one tempo and structure, and then expanding it around it, causing spikes and peaks, valleys, and all sorts of random roller coaster-like ravines and mountains. They have been able to embody something within that core idea. They have been able to take music that similarly is that sounds very similarly conceived, but also make it dynamic. They've been able to make it a little bit more, I guess, personal with each passing track, even though perhaps musically it doesn't sound all of that different. There's little twinges of personality. The first half of this album really boasts it the most. Songs like Ragnarok that have a lot of power behind it, that have excellent choruses, and are able to maintain this idea and then kind of go out of the box just a little bit. Those are the songs that I'm talking about. Those are the ones where the personality and the quirkiness, the little bit of difference and individuality start to spring out of each individual track. Now, as far as the lyrics and as far as the vocals are concerned, it's kind of a weird situation. Periphery has been a band that has underwent a ton of personnel changes throughout their very short career, and that is no different on this album. However, vocally, this sounds almost like Coheed and Cambria decided to mate with a harder-edged, I guess, alternative band of the same vein, and then they just decided and opted that they were going to try to growl every once in a while, and do so decently. It's very, very strange, because whenever you think of Coheed and Cambria, you have a certain thought in your mind. Whenever you hear the words, you have a thought in your mind. While this isn't exactly similar, it does boast kind of the same similar structure, where things are all on a certain level, and then bam, the higher registers hit, and that's where kind of your emphasis is placed on, your clean emphasis vocally is placed on. This overall is an album that is going to do something else for a lot of people that do take the time and take the risk to listen to it. They're going to feel musically safe in the fact that it's all something that is very similar as far as that very basic framework is concerned. However, whenever they hear the technical precision that is embodied within, whenever they start to see the individual tracks explode and explore each individual facet of them, hear the technical side, hear the dynamic side, hear the parts where they are able just to kind of slow it down and give them that opportunity to maybe slam dance a little. This is an album that actually is very transcendent in that nature, where many different styles of music can find something on this album that they're going to, relate to. It's very musically safe, but I have a prediction that a lot of pants will be shat upon. And that's mainly because for some people that are perhaps not as educated in the realms of technical metal, in the realms of progressive metal, even in the realms of gent metal, those who are extremely musically ignorant, and not ignorant in the fact that they are stuck up, stubborn, and not willing to explore, but maybe they haven't had the opportunity, or they don't know where to start. If they listen to this album, this is going to be something unlike they've ever heard before. It's going to be musically unique to them, and for that, they're going to latch on to this band. They're going to latch on to this album. Now, for me personally, the second half of this release, even though there is a song on there that does feature a guest solo by Dream Theater's John Petrucci, is a little bit weaker in nature. I didn't enjoy the second half of the album as much as I enjoyed the first half. So, in order to really do an accurate score on this album, I would almost have to break it up into, two scores. Almost as though this were split-season baseball, like the early 1980s. I believe it was 1981 where that happened. And whenever you do that, the first half of this album, which I will consider to be tracks 1 through 7, I would have to give an 8. Whenever you consider tracks 8 through 14, I'd have to give it a 5.5 to a 6. I'll actually round up and give it a 6. Which overall lands this album at a solid 7. The reason why it's going to be so different for me, considering I seem to be talking this album up as though it was really unique, is because for me personally, I'm just one man. I'm speaking objectively, and I'm speaking using something that's very complex as my backup, which is psychology. I think overall, a lot of people are going to listen to this album and have very polarized opinions. I think seasoned veterans of the different forms of metal that I described, technical, progressive, gent, experimental, are all going to listen to this album and maybe not be impressed. And if they are, they're going to be impressed only in minimal settings, but not throughout the entire thing. However, those who are not as versed, those who perhaps have not been long-time metal veterans, those who are just starting to explore scratch the surface of this genre, either that or are just starting to get out of the mode where they want to listen to more than just one variety of metal, may really embrace this album and find it to be really beautiful. They may find it to be crushing while at the same time harmonious. There's many different things that can be potentially thought of. All I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that if Periphery breaks through, if Periphery ends up on the radio, and if your favorite friend that likes to bash on metal all of a sudden hears Periphery and begins to love them, I wouldn't be terribly shocked. This might be a bit of a stretch. In fact, it might be a lot more of a stretch than the Slipknot presentation that I offered earlier. But once again, don't be surprised if it happens. This has the potential. Because this album, though not as good, has the sound of the Discovery from Born of Osiris, only in a completely different format. Born of Osiris is the Discovery from 2011, was an amazing album. It was one that was able to micromanage chaos, harmony, with a little bit of programming. This album, while it's not able to manage it quite as well, in fact, this album can sometimes feel a little bit lengthy, as though it's dragging its feet, it is still able to convey a clear-cut message, and for a lot of people, they are going to feel something by it. This album will inspire people. Maybe not every person that listens to it, and maybe not the seasoned veterans that they might be trying to win over, but those that are trying out metal for the first time, those that are trying out the subgenre of experimental, djent, or technical metal for the first time, or those that are trying out Periphery for the first time may be very impressed. Do not be shocked if this ends up becoming bigger than it seems like it's going to be. Because I have a gut feeling that it has the potential to break out.